Okay, so we are live. We can begin, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Team ISAR 2021, I am Dr. Kedar Gandla. I welcome you all for this wonderful webinar which we have initiated. This is with academic grants received from Zydus, and the platform is by DocMode. Today's speaker is very well renowned gynecologist from Bombay, Dr. Dhuru Shah. He is the director of Gynac World, which is the Center for Women's Health and Fertility. It's located in Mumbai. The most important is he's a founder president of PCO Society of India. She is founder trustee of Women's Empowerment Foundation. She is a trustee and past president of Mumbai Obstetrics and Gynecological Society. She is a past president of ISAR and past president and digital education on International Menopausal Society and honorary fellow of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. My personal experience with Dr. Durusha has been excellent. I've been learning from her from the day of my residency. Absolute perfectionist. And today we're going to have a lot of crowd because she selected a topic which is out of the box. Madam, welcome on this webinar. Please, you can start.
Um,
Hitesh?
can you hear me?
Hitesh?
Can you hear me, Kedar?
Yes, ma'am. We
Yes,
can
I
hear
can.
you, sir.
You can, yeah.
Okay. So today, I would like to first of all thank everyone for, especially Isar, for having invited me to speak at this meeting, and also Zydus for supporting this event, and DocMode for offering its platform. My talk today is going to be related to managing infertility in serodiscordant HIV couples. And the reason I picked up this topic is because many years ago, maybe 25 years ago, we were all absolutely crazily thinking about HIV. And now today we are in a situation wherein we are, just give me a minute, please. Yes? Yes?
Ma'am, you're on mute. Please unmute yourself.
Sorry about this for this interruption. I apologize. We start with a topic on managing infertility in serodiscordant HIV couples. Now, the reason why I took this topic because we are today discussing COVID all the time, and we are completely distressed because of it. And
Sorry
more
to
than
interrupt,
25
ma'am.
years ago,
We haven't.
yes.
Your screen isn't shared, ma'am. Presentation.
Oh God. Okay. Why is it not sharing?
You need to come to the share screen button and then share it, ma'am.
I'm not seeing the share screen button now.
It's in Zoom, ma'am.
It's above, no?
No, ma'am. At the center bottom, it will be there.
Yeah, just a minute. Is it okay
Yes,
now?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Just click on play and you can continue, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Please continue.
Now can you see everything?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine. So what
Yes,
I
madam.
was saying is that, yeah, that we were talking about, we are talking about COVID today, and 25 to 30 years ago, we were so distressed with HIV that today we have completely ignored it. And I felt that if we have to look at HIV couples who are now wanting to get pregnant, we need to attend to them. And therefore, the learning objectives of this presentation is that we must learn how to manage such serodiscordant patients today. If you look at the prevalence of HIV among adults aged 15 to 49 years of age by the WHO region, I think we would be a little glad to know that we are not really in the topmost bracket of HIV. It's Africa, which has a prevalence of almost 4 to 4.5%, followed by Europe, which by America, which is about 0.5%, and Europe 0.4%. And where India is concerned, we are at 0.3%. But there is a need for management of these couples today because there are a whole lot of people living with HIV worldwide, and about 80% of them are of childbearing age. With improved care of HIV infected adults today, we have converted HIV into a chronic disease with reduced mortality, and we are able to treat those patients. In short, we are able to treat them with proper therapies. Now, today there is an increasing lifespan, and therefore they also have a desire to have children. And with the availability of assisted reproduction, we have now come to a situation wherein we are able to, treat infected couples even with assisted reproduction. So there are a whole lot of successful HIV prevention programs today, which includes condom use, and this has also at the same time reduced HIV transmission rates. But when we talk about access to infertility, we find that our couples, when they come to us, they so hesitantly say that they are seropositive. They are concerned about getting treatment in the centers where they come to because everyone is going to shun them, just the way we are shunning COVID today. The concern is that people are concerned about how they are going to, look after their children once the children are born. There's so much of ignorance. And we have to also think about the woman who has limited autonomy. So she is not able to negotiate safe sex, or access health services on her own. She needs permission from her husband, from her family, etc. So if we come to the HIV virus itself, there are two main types of HIV. One is HIV-1 and the other is HIV-2. If both are untreated, both end with AIDS. And this is what we see, that when they have AIDS, it is mainly in those patients who haven't been treated for HIV. Within the main types of HIV, there are many genetically distinct subtypes. And there are subtypes which combine together, their genetic material combines together to form hybrid virus, which is known as the circulating recombinant form. And about already 89 forms of these are known to exist. Now, this is when this data has been from 2019. We don't know how many more of such hybrid forms have been detected. Worldwide, the predominant virus we see is HIV-1, and this is the one which is most infectious and most common. And this accounts for almost 95% of all the infections worldwide. It's estimated to be more than 55% genetically distinct from HIV-1, from HIV-2, and there are tests available to diagnose whether it's HIV-1 or HIV-2, and we are also able to diagnose the subtypes which are existing today globally. If you look at HIV-1 and HIV-2, and we'll talk about HIV-1 because that's more commonly seen, it has many subgroups, as you see over here, A, B, C, D, etc., etc. But between all of them, M is the major group, and it is responsible for most of the global major epidemic. And the other three groups, that is the N, O, and P, are quite uncommon. These are detected through antibody test, and the subtype HIV-1 subtype B is commonly seen in the US, Europe, Australia, and Asia, and that forms 12% of the global infections, whilst the HIV-1 subtype C is commonly seen in Africa and in India, which accounts for 50% of global infections. The virus too is concentrated mainly in West Africa and other countries which have links with West Africa. So in India, we will commonly see the HIV-1 subtype C, which is different from the subtype B, which is usually seen in the US, Australia, and Europe, and some parts of Asia. Now, in India, we have the second largest population in the world. As we all know, it's about 1.2 billion and more, counting more. And the prevalence of infertility is almost 13 to 19 million per couples. And we see today extended families where there's a lot of family relationships, living in joint families. So, and women do not have the autonomy to decide their own health matters. And infertility is common in India, with mainly the tubal pathology existing in rural areas and ovarian factor in the urban areas existing. So we have the third largest population suffering from HIV, and there's been a decline of almost 57% in the number of new infections from 2010 to 2017. But those which were already infected in the past will remain infected, though will be under control. So there has been quite a bit done by the political leadership, and there's been quite a bit done for HIV to bring it under control. And we do hope it works for COVID too, that we should be able to get rid of it as fast as possible. If you look at the molecular epidemiology of the subtypes in India, as I told you earlier, that the predominance is of HIV-1 subtype C, and this has been collected from 7 different states from many seropositive patients. And these are determined by using two genes, GAG, Pol, and envelope. And these are the different, there are different methodologies which have been used. And I think we need to understand that the Indian HIV-1C epidemic originated around 40 years ago from a single or few genetically related African lineages. And since then, it has largely evolved independently. Now, HIV is also present in semen. When there's unprotected vaginal intercourse, which is, it gives a transmission rate of approximately 0.1% per act. Means approximately 1 out of 100 acts would be, not 1 out of 100, 1 out of 1,000 acts would be a situation where the infection would get transmitted. The first study was done in 1989, and there they found no transmission when IUI was done in 29 uninfected female partners out of the serodiscordant HIV couples. But sometimes we see that when the plasma HIV is negative, it is undetectable, means the copies are very low, less than 200 copies per ml. When you have that level, still the HIV is known to cross through the semen, and it is also known to cross through female genital secretions and also rectal secretions. But the risk is very low when the infected male partner is receiving maximally suppressive antiretroviral therapy. Now, when we talk about antiretroviral therapy, it is labeled as ART. Now, when we say ART, the HIV specialists obviously refer to antiretroviral therapy, whilst when we as fertility specialists talk about ART, we are referring to assisted reproduction technology. So in short, don't get confused today when I speak ART, most of the times it will be antiretroviral therapy. So this viral shedding which occurs in genital secretions of HIV positive individuals, all those who are already on ART and suppressed, but still there is an intermittent shedding in these fluids. This HIV RNA in semen has been detected in 6 to 8% of such men. And semen tested with a positive partner on ART showed HIV RNA in semen samples. Say, for example, if a male partner has been on antiretroviral therapy from 0 to 3 months, almost 11% of the males will transmit the sample even in their semen. Within 4 to 6 months of taking ART, 5% will show sample in their semen. And even after 6 months, almost 6% will show HIV in their semen samples. So therefore, the concern is that if a male partner has been tested, his plasma levels show completely negative HIV, viral load being less than 200 copies per ml, still you'll find that there'll be some shedding occurring in the semen. So this model which has been developed to estimate HIV transmission, if you read it, 100,000 copies of HIV RNA in semen gives a probable transmission of 1 in 100 episodes of intercourse. When you have 1,000 copies of HIV in semen, the probability of transmission is about 3 in 10,000 episodes of intercourse. So it's pretty low. And therefore, when we say it's only 200 copies of HIV in the plasma, the amount of transmission will be almost negligible. So this study, which was done in 1,109 couples with HIV-1 seropositive men and seronegative women, it was found that and 64.6% provided samples for HIV quantification. Majority of the couples were married and cohabitating, and they were constantly sexually active, almost 4 times in a month. The median frequency of sex was that much. So 28.6% reported condomless sex prior to the study, and the median CD4 levels and T cell count was 468 cells per cubic millimeter, and the median plasma HIV RNA concentration was 4 into log 10 copies per ml. That means approximately 4,000 copies per ml. Now, follow-up and results of these 3,500 persons, years of follow-up for HIV showed that 80% of women were converting from seronegative to seropositive, and each log 10 copies per ml increased in plasma HIV RNA was associated with an increase in the endocervical swab showing HIV-1 in 0.5652 log 10 copies and 0.46 log. Now, this is more of a technical jargon, but what I mean to say is that the higher the amount of copies in the plasma, higher will be the amount of transmission. This is exactly what it means. So decreasing the risk of transmission to the female partner, it was then compared with unprotected intercourse. So we basically what we need to understand that when we are treating a couple, there are certain principles we have to follow. We have to make sure that the female partner does not get infected. We have to make sure that the baby doesn't get infected. We have to make sure that we intervene very early during the prenatal period. Intrapartum treatment also should be utilized to reduce transmission to the child, as we all are aware of it. And alternatives such as adoption, not having children, donor sperm, if the female is unaffected, is also offered. And surrogacy is offered if the female is affected. So these are the different ways in which we can reduce the transmission to the female partner. So here you have the sort of a setup as to what we are going to do in a patient where the husband is positive and the wife is negative. Now you want to prevent the transmission, so you would use either a donor sperm, or you would do IUI with washed sperm, or you would offer IVF with ICSI, or you will put the male partner on highly active antiretroviral therapy with plasma viral load being undetectable. And then we will also offer oral preconception, pre-exposure HIV prophylaxis to the uninfected female partner. So now we'll come to each of these and see what we need to do. So as we saw that HIV is carried in the seminal fluid and also in the white blood cell. So it's not present only, it's present in the seminal plasma. And we must understand that there are HIV receptors which are, as of today, not being shown to be expressed by spermatozoa. Hence, sperms do not carry HIV, though there's been a bit of a controversy on this. A combination of density gradient centrifugation followed by swim-up has been proposed as a two-way separate HIV-free motile spermatozoa. So basically talking about doing a density gradient preparation of the semen so that you can have separate HIV-free motile sperms from the seminal plasma, and thus preventing infection to the female partners. Because when we do an IUI, we are only using the sperms, and we have to make sure that the seminal plasma doesn't get mixed up with the sperms when we are doing the separation of the sperm from the seminal plasma. Sperm washing prior to IUI eliminates the seminal plasma and the majority of the immotile sperms. It is easy to contaminate a sperm preparation with microscopic quantities of seminal plasma, and therefore we have to be very sure that we do the separation well. Now, after washing the sperm, we can test the presence of HIV in that sperm by doing PCR assays. And less than 1% of washed sperm samples from virally suppressed HIV infected men are positive. So question is, if we are going to do a semen wash and use it, what are we going to do? Are we going to infect the female partner with that washed sperm sample? Secondly, if we wash a sperm sample and then we subject it to PCR assays for the presence of HIV, that means that sample may not be still valid later. So it makes sense for us to probably wash the sample, take a small aliquot of it, freeze the rest, take a small aliquot and then check whether it is infected or not. If it's not infected, preserve that sample, the main sample, to be used when we want to use it. And if the aliquot shows that the sperm sample is infected, then we throw away that sperm sample. That is the way which we could treat the patient with an IUI if we are going to do IUI for such patients. So many studies have been reported since then with IUI, with IVF and ICSI, and there were many, controversial results coming from these studies. And therefore, meta-analysis was done in March 2016. And they took all the studies which were there from all the countries, and they looked at their primary outcome to see whether HIV was getting transmitted to the infected woman, and the secondary outcome was HIV transmission to the newborns. And third is whether pregnancies were achieved or not after this IUI methodology. So they looked at this study group, which was they took in 40 single arm open label study, and HIV discovered in couples who were undergoing fertility treatment either through IUI, IVF, or ICSI, and they covered about 11,585 cycles in 3,994 women. So approximately 4,000 women and 12,000 cycles. There was no HIV transmission seen in non-infected women. So in short, there was no HIV transmission at all, but it was done when the husbands, this happened in husbands who were completely suppressed with antiretroviral therapy. But when the patient's husbands were not suppressed, then they found that 27.1% of the cycles there was infection transmitted. So in these 40 studies, 29 studies, they did a density gradient and swim up. In 8 studies, they done only a density gradient. In 1 study, they did double swim up, and 2 studies, they had not recorded what they had done. So if you want to understand which kind of sample semen wash is ideal for an IUI, these studies brought out that effect, and they found that PCR was, of course, they did the PCR to detect the HIV in the washed semen fractions, and the seminal fractions that tested positive were discarded. And there was seen absence of HIV transmission in men even without viral suppression. 56.3% of couples achieved a successful pregnancy using washed semen, and there was no HIV transmission to the infants. So in short, the men who were suppressed, definitely there was zero. But here they say that the absence of HIV transmission was seen even without viral suppression, which again has been controversial, and therefore there have been further studies done after this. So here we have 28 studies reported a plasma viral load of the infection at the time of semen washing. This is in the same study. 28 studies have reported the plasma viral load. Out of this, in these 28 studies, 985 men out of the 1,890 men were not virally suppressed. Means almost 52% of them were not suppressed. Viral suppression included a load of 400 copies. They looked at a cutoff of 400 copies or less per ml, and CD4 levels were reported in 21 studies where the average CD4 count was 200 to 608 cells per ml. Only 5 studies reported on post-wash semen RNA ranging from 1.3% to 7.7%. So when they did this meta-analysis, there was a lot of variation in what studies had reported. So there were different kinds of washes done, there were different kinds of reporting done, the different kind of only 5 studies were reporting the post-wash semen RNA positivity. So it came to that the semen washing is an effective method to prevent transmission in men who are unwilling to initiate antiretroviral therapy or non-compliant to therapy or not virally suppressed. 1/3 of men in the sub-Saharan region are not virally suppressed in spite of taking antiretrovirals. So what we say is the antiretroviral therapy has to be taken at least for 6 months, and the viral load has to show below 200 copies when we can say this is the current recommendation. Has to be below 200 copies so that we can say that this person is negative for viral load. So in this studies, 48, I mean, there are various studies which have been reported here. 48% of men with undetectable viral load in plasma have detectable virus in their semen. So you can imagine the kind of controversies which are existing in all this data, where some say there is no transmission, some say there is transmission. The question is what happens when the sample, the semen sample shows virus, but then does that virus really affect the wife? Because the studies, the meta-analysis shows that yes, there was a virus in the wash sample, but the wife was not getting infected, nor were the babies getting infected. So this is the different studies, how they have reported. So therefore, now coming to this conclusion in this study, 3,994 women undergoing these cycles of ART, there was no difference in the transmission rate to the mother or newborn with HIV, either using IUI, IVF, or ICSI. And what has been said is that when you do IUI versus IVF, it is 10 times less expensive, it's less invasive, there is no surgical risk, and there are no extra facilities, especially for low resource settings. So here we have a situation that we are recommending that you should do an IUI preferably because it offers affordable, effective, feasible, and safe strategy for preventing HIV transmission among HIV discordant couples desiring children. So IUI with wash sperm can be in couples with normal fertility parameters where everything else is normal. The patient doesn't require any IVF or ICSI, and wash sperm will become a safe and effective strategy. But what we need to do is we have to treat the female partner with pre-exposure prophylaxis. So with pre-exposure prophylaxis, we'll go into the details of that. And at the same time, the couples who have got abnormal findings can be offered IVF or ICSI. ICSI is supposed to be better because you're going to use just one sperm at a time. With IVF, you're putting in many sperms together with one egg. So we will discuss that too. Now here, this study where we are talking about this Cochrane database review showed that if you want to determine the benefits of and risk of the different treatments for HIV transmission, there is no documented transmission of HIV through any processing methods currently used. It is unclear how randomization to treatment other than sperm washing could ethically be performed. So there is no randomized control trial to show that if I wash the sperm and put it in, or if I don't wash it and put it in, because it will be unethical to do such a study. And hence there are no randomized clinical trials available. But whatever studies have been shown, it has been shown that whatever methods have been used to attempt conception, to prevent HIV transmission, semen washing is extremely important to be done. When you do ICSI, it provides the least amount of sperm. As we have seen, we take only one sperm. There's no plasma with it. Sperm samples negative for disease are already available to the patient for future cycles. So we have stored the sperms, we have tested them, and then we are using it later. There is no need to recover large numbers of sperms to achieve pregnancy rates. And there are 3 times higher pregnancy rates per cycle compared to IUI. And a higher pregnancy rate decreases the number of attempts and exposures. So this goes in favor of ICSI, but everybody cannot have ICSI because either they may not afford it or they may not have access to ICSI. So this is the reason why we have to look at these methods in our country, which are economically easier to use and economically viable to be used in such patients. So coming to the pre-exposure prophylaxis, it involves using a pharmaceutical agent prior to an exposure, such as just like we use prophylaxis for malaria. We are always giving anti-malarial prophylaxis before the patient gets malaria. So similarly, we use antiretroviral therapy to prevent HIV use. So what is used is tenofovir in a combination with emtricitabine as a single tablet fixed dose combination, which is called FDC. And the present guidelines support the use of this in combination for effective PrEP. So PrEP stands for pre-exposure prophylaxis, where this tablet is given to the lady so that she is protected from picking up infection even through natural intercourse if she tries during when she is trying to conceive, or even when she is undergoing an IUI, she can be given this as a prophylaxis on the day when the IUI is done. Now, in December 2015, the use of PrEP was approved by the Medical Council in combination with safer sexual practices and HIV prevention services, which include regular HIV testing, condoms, lubrication, contraception, STIs, management, all that goes on side by side as a preventive service. As a matter of fact, I was present at the WHO meeting when they approved the use of PrEP in combination with safe sexual practices for fertility in patients who are having serodiscordancy, in serodiscordant couples wanting to get pregnant. See, the situation is it's not necessary that they are infertile. They may be fertile couples, but they have been told to use condoms every single time. And then how do they get pregnant if they are going to use condoms every single time? That is the concern. So, in short, if the couple has been completely investigated, we have ruled out any other pathology, and we feel that we want to try just normal intercourse for the patient or even IUI for the patient, it could be done with the use of either using condoms during sexual intercourse at other times. Of course, the man has to be ideally virally suppressed, and they can have intercourse on the day she is ovulating. On that day, the lady takes pre-exposure prophylaxis, or she takes the prophylaxis and undergoes an IUI on the day of ovulation. So here you have various strategies where you have PrEP and you have timed condomless sex. So they have looked at various possibilities, and male to female, female to male, etc., etc. But as I've discussed with you before, how it is given, here you have to make sure that the man is on antiretroviral therapy at least for more than 6 months, and his viral load is less than 10% of the
Hello, Dr. Durusha.
Hitesh, Hitesh,
Yes, I think ma'am has a internet issue, sir.
and the questions, where are the questions?
Yes, I'm giving it to you on chat.
Okay. हे लावू ना तिकडे कनेक्शन कर समीर हे सगळे नंबर एंटर करायचे हितेश हितेश
Hello, Dr. Kedar. Dr. Durusha has a power issue over there. She's connecting in the next 2 minutes.
Unmuting and I'm starting my video also. Come to the slide on pre-exposure prophylaxis.
Please take control and continue, ma'am.
Yeah. Sorry about this break in my network. So I had talked about the pre-exposure prophylaxis. Can you hear me well?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you-
Perfectly
Yeah.
fine.
Okay. So the present guidelines support the use of TDF and FTC as a combination for effective PrEP. Now, the next slide is it's not shifting. I'm not able to move the next slide.
Just tap on the right side, ma'am.
On the remote button, right?
No. On the screen itself.
Okay.
Can you tap on the right side?
Yeah, I'm doing that. Okay.
Yeah.
So this we have already discussed. I'll go to the next one. Yeah, this is the one where I'm talking about PrEP, where it's used, as I mentioned earlier. And if the person is a positive partner where the copies have not been done, the tests have not been done, viral load is unavailable, or the client may not want to do it, then it is not practical for them to do all this. So, in short, what we say is that if they have timed sex, and on the day when they don't use a condom, the day of ovulation, they don't use a condom, and the lady uses PrEP at that time. So, these are the different ways in which PrEP can be used. So here we have they looked at the cost effectiveness of PrEP for HIV prevention for conception in the US. And they wanted to see whether which is more effective, cost effective. Either we, ask the patient to do a pre-exposure prophylaxis or do the viral load, etc. And they came with the result that with suppressed male partners on ART and condomless intercourse, which is limited to ovulation, PrEP was not cost effective. And when the male partner was not well suppressed, PrEP was cost effective and cost saving. So when we are doing a viral load for the male partner, and we have found that the viral load is less than 200 copies per ml, then it makes sense for the lady not to take the PrEP and to go ahead with condomless intercourse, which is limited only to ovulation. And that is what is suggested. But this is only keeping the cost figures in mind. Our personal recommendation is for a person to take the medication and have condomless sex on the day of ovulation when her male partner is completely suppressed. Now we have done male fertility treatment. We had done the ethics of fertility treatment in couples who have got seropositivity. And here, this study has, this data we have published this information on the ethics in these patients, because in our country we find that there is so much of a fear of stigmatization. There's concerns for horizontal and vertical transmission. There's lack of services available in the public sector, non-affordability of ART services in the private sector, and transmission in the clinic itself. There's a transmission to clinic personnel, cross-contamination of gametes and embryos. And therefore, there are many guidelines also put up by medical organizations where we recommend that there should be separate units to treat HIV positive couples. So in short, a lot of couples are, very disillusioned with treatment, and they go away from centers because they have not been given enough adequate help. So after this came there's a new launch of a prevention access campaign in 2016, which is called the Health Equity Initiative. And over here, what they say is that undetectable is equal to untransmittable, which means individuals with HIV who receive antiretroviral therapy and have achieved and maintained an undetectable viral load cannot sexually transmit the virus to others. Now, this is what is being said, that U is equal to U, and it is based on strong scientific evidence. And how do they come to this conclusion? In 1996, there were 3 drug combinations of antiretroviral therapy, including protease inhibitors, which was developed. And in 2008, U is equal to U concept was first declared by WHO. And in 2011, based on a study which was on HIV Prevention Trial Network, it was also, they did 2 studies on partner 1 study, which included couples which were serodiscordant, and partner 2 was where there were male to male couples, sexual transmission. And these couples were followed up, wherein they received 96.4% reduction in HIV transmission was seen in the early ART group versus delayed ART group. And this was the first evidence of treatment as prevention. And in 2016, they followed up at the end of 5 years, and they found there was 0 transmission. So this was partner 1 study. And in the first part, they took up the serodiscordant couples. And in this study, which was lasting from 15 September 2010 to 31st May 2014, they included both the types of couples, heterosexual and gay couples. And this study went on till 14, and it was a prospective study in 75 sites in 14 European countries. And it ended, the partner 2 study ended in April 30th, 2018, which was that second part of the study was only dedicated to gay couples. In partner 1 study, 548 heterosexual couples were involved and 340 gay couples. And they went ahead with condomless penetrative sex in 439 couples with no use of PrEP by the HIV negative partner. The viral load was sustainably achieved to less than 200 copies per ml in the seropositive partner, and there was no transmission in the 58,000 condomless sexual acts when all this was followed. Then the partner 2 study came up, which was restricted to men having sex with men. And in this, they found that 77,000 acts of condomless anal intercourse with 588.4 couple years of follow-up, during which they found that there was no transmission of infection, especially if the affected partner had an undetectable viral load of less than 200 copies per ml. So this was the study they came up with, and then the concept of U is equal to U became well known, wherein they say that this is exactly what I've told you all, that in this situation where there is effective ART, the most effective strategy is to ensure that any HIV positive partner is established on ART, adherent to treatment, and has a recently confirmed undetectable plasma viral load. In this situation, the person is considered as U is to U, equal to U, meaning undetectable equal to uninfectious or untransmissible. So this is the concept which is being followed world over now. And this is what I've explained to you. They have done thousands of cases and they have found that detection of HIV RNA in semen does not, because in these some of these patients, the certain percentage of patients, they found that there was semen was showing HIV RNA, but they found that it is, even though the semen is having that, it is not getting transmitted to the female partner, maybe because the virus is not complete or it is not replication competent, it is not competent to replicate itself, or it is present in insufficient levels to cause any transmission. So this was the, finally the hypothesis which was put up on these situations. Now, for principles to achieve and maintain an undetectable, what is the man supposed to do? In order to have to be taken up for fertility therapy and get maximum benefit, the medication should be taken as prescribed. He has to take the medication up to 6 months. Once he has taken for 6 months and for 6 months he shows that the viral load is negative, then he has to continue the medication. The viral load testing should be performed every 3 to 4 months after the level has reached undetectable. And 2 years after viral load testing is undetectable, it should be tested every 6 months after that. So this treatment is given lifelong. But when the person wants to have a baby, they have to make sure that for at least 6 months, continuous therapy, the load has to be negative for at least 3 to 4 months before going ahead with treatment for fertility. So the combination of the guidelines to support HIV affected individuals and couples to achieve pregnancy safely has been updated in 2018. And what is said is that the combination of ART initiation in the HIV positive partner with PrEP coverage in the HIV negative partner until the positive partner is confirmed to be suppressed less than 200 copies per ml and has been on treatment for at least 6 months, has been shown to completely remove the risk of HIV transmission when both ART and PrEP is maintained. So these are the latest guidelines on this subject. Where the HIV positive partner is virally suppressed, then all other safer conception strategies become optional. In that case, the couples may, however, still use other options, such as they can still go ahead with IVF or ICSI. They have to make an informed choice. For the purposes of this guideline, an undetected viral load is considered to be anything which is 200 copies per ml or less. And increasing evidence shows that there is little to be gained by offering, sperm washing or IVF or ICSI if the male partner is adhering to his treatment and is confirmed to be virally suppressed. So in short, what this says is it is no longer considered necessary to refer couples with presumed normal fertility for assisted reproductive technology, such as sperm washing and IUI, unless it is their choice and they are made aware of the cost involved. So this was our own personal experience. We said, let us see in our own setup in Indian data, because these studies have been done abroad in Europe, where the type of HIV virus is different. And we wanted to have our own experience. And we started this study of evaluating the sperm after wash in our males who have been affected with HIV. We wanted to do a number of 100. We have reached up to about almost 50. And now with March lockdown, we have not been able to achieve anything since then. But till then, we have done approximately 46 patients. So viral load, what we have taken viral load is less than 20 copies per ml, because the kit we are using shows that as a cutoff. So it's that sensitive a kit. And untreated HIV, we are excluding patients who have got untreated HIV associated co-infections like tuberculosis, etc. We are not including those couples. The plasma viral load is tested and CD45, CD3, CD4 counts are done. We collect the semen, we aliquot it, and we wash it with density gradient centrifugate, 2 washes and subsequent swimmer. And the prepared sperm is frozen. And a small aliquot is taken of the wash sample. First, we have taken a small aliquot of the plasma, seminal plasma before the wash, and then we have taken it after the wash also. And then we have also tested the cell, the pellet. So the technology used is the most, the current technology used all over the world. And this is molecular testing, and all processing has been done at Metropolis, where we have used appropriate biosafety conditions. This is a pilot study of 46 patients where we did the testing through RNA PCR using the Roche TaqMan version 2 kit and undetectable levels at less than 20 copies per ml. Now, these are the data we have. And this is the first slide showing a certain number, half the patients here. What I want to point out in this slide is that if you see the HIV viral load, the buns in pink, they are below 20 copies per ml. In the semen also you see below 20 copies. In the just half a minute, please. In the test, which is the viral load, seminal plasma is showing 935 copies per ml, and the CD4 is showing pretty low at 225. So in short, we also found that when we are doing the semen wash, we may still find in the seminal plasma some amount of HIV still present, which is more than 20 copies according to our cutoff, but even according to the viral load suggested is 200, here it's showing 935. Now here we have another pink bar in the next slide where similar situation where we see 125 copies per ml in the plasma, but the CD4 count is good. If you go to the previous slide, actually, 1 minute. Sorry. I'm sorry. Can you go back, please, on the slide?
Yes, ma'am. 1 second.
Yeah. Just go back to the first analysis. Yeah. Whilst if you see the green bars, the blue bars, you will find over here the situation is little different, where you see that the viral load is high, but when we do the semen testing, there is no sample seen, no virus seen in the semen. And so you get different kinds of data. But the analysis from this has shown that all these men were on 6 months of treatment. Most of their viral loads were negative and less than 20 copies. The age was between 20 to 46 years, with the mean age being 35.7 years. But if you see over here, 46 patients with a blood plasma, 3 samples showed more than 20 copies per ml. Out of the 44 patients' semen samples, 2 samples showed more than 20 copies. Out of the 44 patients' seminal plasma, 5 samples showed 20 copies. And post-wash samples, none of them showed more than 20 copies. So the wash definitely helped. And the sample which was post-wash showed zero presence of HIV virus. So if you look at other viruses, the hepatitis B virus and the hepatitis C virus, which are also sexually transmitted and which are present in a large amount of our patients, which are higher than what we see in our HIV patients, we also can utilize the same methodology in these patients, wherein, there also it is, we find that we have millions of people who are infected, and probably the same technology could be used where we could wash the semen and insert it in the non-infected wife. Of course, with hepatitis B, the woman can be immunized or vaccinated, and then she can have penetrative sex. But where hepatitis C is concerned, currently there is no vaccine available for hepatitis C. One slide back, please. So I would like to summarize my talk. Go back. We must realize that affected seropositive HIV couples are living longer and they desire fertility. And the current recommendations, as I mentioned earlier, for fertile couples is that you can recommend condomless sex to reduce transmission if the male partner has an undetectable viral load less than 200 copies per ml and is under treatment for more than 6 months. For HIV serodiscordant infertile couples, depending on the cause of infertility or the cause of their problems, further management is managed by IUI, IVF, or ICSI, depending on what is the problem with that particular couple. Improved outcomes have been seen with the use of PrEP and use of semen and wash sample and IUI, IVF, ICSI, reduction of plasma viral load, and this transmission has almost gone to 0%. Fertility services are unfortunately not available in most of the public and private sectors for couples with HIV positivity. Hence, couples risk sexual HIV transmission. In order to achieve a pregnancy, the desire to have a child is so much that they go ahead with intercourse, even with knowing that they can transmit it to the baby. So IUI with washed semen of an undetectable viral load in a seropositive partner and PrEP has zero transmission rate, and that's what we should suggest to our patients. And we need to do much more research on the different subtypes of HIV, because this research, what we are doing is on the Indian type, HIV-1 subtype C, and we need to offer these services to low resource settings where we see a lot of seropositivity because of transmission. Because of women not having the right to say no to condomless sex, and the men would bring the infection probably from the cities to the villages. Access to assisted reproduction is not easily available in the rural areas, and therefore we need to do a lot of counseling and lot of advocacy on this and offer treatment in the right way to these couples. I'd like to end my talk by announcing through the PCOS Society of India a quiz contest, PCOS quizzes, which is starting very soon in August, and we want you all to join in. All details are available on the website, so please do join in. There are fantastic prizes to be won, so look forward to seeing you all. Thank you so much for your kind attention, and I'm sorry for this disturbance in the slide display. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, madam, for excellent presentation. Hitesh, can you give me the questions?
I've sent you on chat, sir.
On chat? Okay.
Yes, sir.
No, I cannot see them on the chat, Hitesh.
So I'll just put it once again.
Okay. And can you share the screen for a minute?
Yes, once again, I'm just sharing your screen, so we'll start with that.
Madam, I'll just take 2 minutes to just
Sure.
show the presentation. Okay, now we have, next slide, please. We have Dr. Sadhna Desai's endowment fund, NISAR, which Dr. Sadhna Desai has donated some fund which can be useful for needy couples. But the couple has to have require for IVF ICSI treatment in case of financial assistance. Next slide, please. The doctor needs to apply first, and if the couple is eligible, then the couple will get rupees 50,000 for having an IVF with her own eggs. Next slide, please. Then we have the Journal of Human Reproduction Science, which is covering almost all the aspect of human reproduction, including andrology, assisted reproductive technology, endocrinology, pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. Next slide, please. And this is Dr. Madhuri Patil with the chief editor. We have a very good impact factor and 40% over the submission. So I urge to all my ISAR fellows that please put your papers in this wonderful journal, which ISAR is doing, and Madhuri Patil is the chief editor. Next slide, please. Then is the talking about accreditation. This is the ISAR accreditation, and we have come out with now accreditation on virtual accreditation. So one of the out of the three process, two can be done only by virtually. So at the present moments, when you do not have too much of work, you could have get your center accredited, not very expensive. Next slide. Next slide. Hitesh. And these are the 5 people who are the coordinators in each zone. Please get in touch with them and they will help you to start the process of accreditation as soon as possible. Thank you very much for a patient hearing. And I come back to you, Dr. Durusha, again, that there are certain questions which I have and I cannot see anything in the chat box. And neither in the question answer session.
Sir, I've sent it in the chat box, sir. Can you see that link?
But I opened. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay, sir. Yeah.
No, 1 minute. But that link needs to be copied, huh?
Yes, sir. You can just open it in a new tab.
Hitesh, it should have been done earlier, no? Okay. Now, madam,
Yes.
there are questions. Okay. Can you explain the disclosure of HIV status?
Your
Dr.
voice is
Sarthi-
not coming through, Kedar. I can't hear you.
Okay, 1 minute, madam. 1 minute. Hello, can you hear me now, madam?
Yeah, much better.
Yeah, madam. So now Dr. Sarthi wants to know how do you disclosure of HIV status? Is there a regiment when we are telling about whether a patient is HIV positive or negative? How do you do that? Somebody
Means
wants to know.
disclosure to whom?
Patient is explain. The question is about, can you explain disclosure of HIV status? I think to the patient itself.
So disclosure means once we do, when we are treating our patients, normally, if we find that the husband is positive and we have to
Yeah.
explain it to the wife, it is
Uh-huh.
important for us to discuss with the husband that we are going to be talking to the wife about the HIV status, HIV positive status, because you are going to be sexually active with your wife and she's going to get
Okay.
affected. So it's important for us to tell the wife. Ethically, I think we are right if we tell the wife, because we always believe in doing no harm. So even though
Absolutely.
we are talking about protecting the husband from disclosing his HIV status to his wife, but I think we'll be doing more harm by not telling the wife, and therefore it is ethical for us to inform the wife after informing the husband that we are going to inform her.
Okay. Now, madam, somebody asked a question, Dr. Mustafa Zariwala, that can you explain the semen handling and processing? What I mean to say is they want to know, they may be also wanting to know that this when you are doing the processing of such sample, how
Yes.
do we take care that the transmission doesn't happen to them and also to the other patients?
Yeah. So that's why this semen wash, when we, most of the centers or most of the guidelines, if you see, they will all recommend that you need to have a separate laminar flow hood for doing the testing. You may not have a separate
Okay.
complete unit, another room, which
Yes.
many
Yes.
people in major cities cannot afford. But a separate laminar hood is
Correct.
definitely necessary. It's a biosafe cabinet under which you work. So that is why
Okay.
it has to be done in a space wherein there is a separate laminar flow available for all infectious diseases. Just like how you do it. That's why we had to do this, the what do you call it, the separation or the semen wash. We normally do semen wash in our own IVF lab, right? But when we are doing it for
Yeah.
seropositive patients, we don't have a
Mhm.
separate laminar flow for infected cases, and therefore we got
Correct.
the procedure done at the biosafety space which existed in Metropolis, because they run samples over there which are infectious samples. When they are testing, they are
Okay.
always using separate hoods for that. So we did the semen wash
Okay.
over there. So this is how
Okay.
we have to take precautions that the person who's handling the sample doesn't get exposed to the infection. And when we use a laminar flow, it should not be a horizontal laminar flow wherein the air is coming
Mm.
towards you, but it should be a vertical one
Mm.
wherein the air is flowing from up to
Okay.
down.
Very nice. Mhm.
And the tank
Okay.
in which you
Some
preserve the sample also has to be a separate tank, not in the same tank
tank.
where your
Yeah.
other sperm samples are there.
Okay. Excellent, madam. Uh, there is something somebody is asking: are there any teratogenic effect of HIV if missed by semen washing?
No,
Teratogenic effect? No, no.
no.
This can you estimate time intercourse for these couples? I have not understood this question. Can you explain conception under heart, HAART? So I think
Highly active
this, yeah,
antiretroviral therapy. So that's what we
yeah,
say, that the, you see, nowadays there are people who have HIV who are under care of
mm,
physicians who are specialists in
mm,
treating HIV patients. Correct?
correct,
They put them on
correct,
various
yeah,
types of newer drugs. There are so many antiretroviral drugs available now. So they treat it in various
mm,
combinations, just like we treat COX. When we are treating
correct,
tuberculosis, it's not the same drugs we use.
correct,
There are different
yeah,
combinations. So similarly, for
yes,
HIV also, there are various retroviral therapy available, and it is
mm,
offered to the patient by the
mm,
specialist, and the monitoring is done by doing the viral load. So if the
okay,
person has got a viral load which is very high, based on that they
mm,
decide what therapy to give to the patient. And until it
wow,
becomes undetectable, then they may modify
mm,
the treatment a little bit and bring down the number of drugs they are giving. And at the same time,
mm,
they also monitor the CD4 levels so that they know
mm,
whether the immunity of the person is affected heavily. Because every
mm,
drug they give is also has to be looked for side effects of the drug, and therefore it's very sort of done beautifully by these physicians. So we refer
mm,
the husbands to the
yes,
physicians who treat them, bring
okay,
them to an undetectable level, which for should be at least for 3 to 4 months non-detectable, and only then we use them for treatment.
okay. Now, madam, there is one question from my side. Uh, are there any new sperm preparation techniques which have come, like say microfluidics, which is now being used to select the least DNA fragmented sperms? Similarly, which also controls all the seminal particles. So, are there any studies have come out on this subject?
No, as a matter of fact, I haven't come across any for HIV
Anything?
particularly on this. The current technology
Okay.
uses a regular double density sperm wash.
Mm, Dharmadas. Okay. Now there is from
Mm. Mm.
Dr.
Yeah.
Sachin Cha from Pune. Hello.
Yeah.
He says that the wife is HIV negative, and
Yes.
say the doctor has done a donor semen insemination.
Huh.
Now, suppose that the wife becomes HIV positive, hmm,
Hmm.
maybe due to donor insemination. Now, how do we manage medical legally in case
See,
if the baby is positive or negative? It's
See, I think when
very
we are
complex.
using a donor sample, we are obviously getting it from an agency which is a sperm bank,
Yes,
and they
yes.
would supply the certificate to say that this
Mm,
particular person who's donated, whose donor sperm it is
mm,
an HIV
mm,
negative status person. And frankly, if we are maintaining that information with us when we are using donor sperm, it will not be us who
mm.
will be responsible. It will be the people who are supplying the donor sperm who could be held responsible for this. So, in short, it's better not to
Okay,
use fresh donor sample at all. Always use a
absolutely,
frozen donor
absolutely.
sample and use it from or if you're using a fresh donor, it's not recommended to use fresh donor at all because it has to be frozen, it has to be kept for 6 months. We have to repeat the HIV test
Mm.
of that person again to make sure that the window period is over. All that has to be done. So, ideally, it's best to use a frozen sample from a bank so that you're not held responsible.
I think that's very important that they should know that it has to be from the bank and not from the any donor which comes to them. Uh, then somebody wants to know about third party assisted reproduction for HIV infected intended parents, madam. Third party. So I
Yeah.
think they are asking the donor eggs and maybe surrogacy.
See, normally when we do surrogacy, the patient who's a surrogate has to be tested first whether she's HIV positive or negative, because at least before you transfer the embryo into her, you have to check whether she's positive or negative. Number one. Second thing is,
Mm,
the if the husband is or the wife, the couple whose embryos they are, if they are seropositive
mm,
themselves,
mm,
and then you're transferring those
mm,
embryos into a surrogate. First of all, there
mm,
have been plenty of studies done where they have found that there is no
mm.
transmission. Second thing is, the donor has to
Okay.
be, I mean, the surrogate has to be informed that
Mm, mm.
these
The embryos are HIV
embryos
positive.
are from an infected couple,
HIV
and
positive.
if
Yeah.
she's still willing, then you take a legal, I mean, you take a acknowledgement from her that she's aware of it and she's willing to have the transfer done. Then there is
Okay.
no issue. But otherwise, it's unethical to transfer without informing the surrogate.
Madam, how long does this lady say a wife is negative, husband is positive, and if you are going to do IUI, how long we have to give suppressive therapy for her
Not for her.
just to prevent? No, no, when you're doing the process of IUI, we don't give her any.
See, if the husband is completely suppressed, his viral load is
Okay.
negative, and if
Uh,
you want to be double sure, you give her a tablet
yeah.
on the day when she's
Yeah.
undergoing the IUI.
Okay.
Just one tablet, like a
One day.
pre-exposure
Okay.
prophylaxis, only on that day.
Okay.
Because
Now,
see, on
madam.
other days, you
Mm,
would recommend to them to use condoms. Correct. Now, this is a fertile
correct.
couple, no infertility issue. Fertile couple wants to get pregnant.
Mm,
Husband is
mm,
positive, wife is negative. So if you
okay.
keep telling them to use condoms every single day, how
I
will she get
understand.
pregnant? So you tell
All
them
right.
to have condomless sex on the day of ovulation. On that day, you
Mm,
give her the prep. And he has to
okay.
be completely negative in his viral load.
Okay. Now, madam, we talked about lot about HIV positive men, but in HIV positive females, okay,
Sorry, I can't
do
hear
we,
you.
HIV positive females,
Yes.
do we expect a lot of pelvic inflammatory disease and decrease ovarian reserve or other infertility components being little higher on the higher side? Is this
See,
an observation?
yeah. No, women who are positive, they may have associated morbidities or infections, like they are more prone to develop tuberculosis. So they may have
Okay.
genital tuberculosis. They may
Okay.
develop some, other infections of the reproductive tract. So their immunity is low. So they are likely to develop infections of the pelvis and therefore have infertility because of that. But HIV per se
Okay.
itself will not cause a problem.
Not cause this. Okay. Mhm. Uh, how to treat a couple where female partner has got low ovarian reserve and male partner is not adequately suppressed? Can we go ahead with ART? Means I think donor egg program she's asking.
I
This is
think
from Dr.
um,
Prima.
I think the first
Without,
prerequisite husband has to be virally suppressed. I think that is very, very important.
important.
That he must be virally suppressed. Now, suppose he says, no, I'm not going to, I'm not willing to take the medication, or I'm not willing to, he's not taking it properly. So, obviously, it will be in the semen. So, what we have to do is, I mean, of course, counsel the couple that there is a chance of transmission, and the wife should be given PrEP on the day of embryo transfer. She will undergo ICSI. There will be only one sperm used for one egg. She's got anyway low ovarian reserve. So she will undergo an ovum pickup, whatever number of eggs she has. Use the husband's semen, wash it, do ICSI, and then transfer. And on the day when you're doing the transfer, she takes PrEP.
Okay. So, madam, that is a great presentation, and I wish we should, inform a lot of
Can't
people
hear
about
you.
your project
Can't hear
and
you.
more data. Hello,
Yeah.
more data can be collected. So maybe your project needs little more highlightment. Let's
If
see
there were
from
women, it
this
would
year.
be easier. With men to come
Yeah.
and give their semen sample is not very easy.
So, madam, we finished with all the question answers, and I'm extremely happy to tell you that there are lots of messages saying that this is a wonderful presentation. They have heard it from you
Thank you.
after a long, long time, maybe after 4 months, and it was the most updated presentation. Thank you very much, madam, for
Thank you.
taking out special time for us. And
Thank
we
you.
know that you always are one of the well wishers of ISAR. And thank you very much for your guidance from my side. Thank you.